What if the woman everyone turned their back on was the only one brave enough to stay? She cooked meals no one would touch her for. She raised boys who weren't hers. She fixed a farm that was falling apart, with cracked hands and a name that was dragged through every saloon from here to the county line. And somehow, without trying, she changed everything. This is not a story about a hero riding in on a white horse. This is a story about the people nobody notices, and what happens when one stubborn, broken-down widower decides to give the unwanted a chance. Stick around, because what happens at that dinner table is going to surprise you. The town of Red Rock Flats, nestled in the flat, sun-scorched plains of the Arizona Territory, was the kind of place that kept its opinions loud and its mercy real quiet. Population: 412 souls, most of them convinced they knew exactly what kind of person belonged and what kind didn't. There was one general store, one church, one schoolhouse with a leaking roof, and enough gossip to fill a river twice over. It was the kind of town where a woman's reputation mattered more than her character, where one mistake, one moment of choosing wrong, could follow a person from the cradle to the grave. Everyone in Red Rock Flats knew the name Clara Mae Sutton, and almost none of them said it kindly. She had come to Red Rock Flats 2 years earlier with her husband, James Sutton, a quiet man with calloused hands and a dream too big for the land. James had borrowed money to start a small boarding house on the edge of town. He believed in Clara, he believed in the work, and then one winter morning, with 3 feet of snow on the ground and the temperature at 14 below zero, James Sutton dropped dead of a heart failure while carrying firewood from the back porch. He left Clara with nothing. No money, no property. The boarding house went back to the bank in less than 45 days, and no family within 200 miles. What she did have was a neighbor, a railroad man named Holt Greer, who offered her shelter while she grieved. And for 6 weeks, Clara accepted that shelter. Not because she wanted to, not because it was easy, but because she had nowhere else to go. The town decided what that meant, and from that moment on, Clara Mae Sutton was a woman with a mark on her. Now, here's what I want you to think about. Have you ever watched someone be punished for surviving? Just sit with that for a second, because that's exactly what was happening to Clara, and it gets worse before it gets better.
God forgive me.
Elias Boone was not a happy man. He hadn't been happy in 3 years, since the fever took his wife, Margaret, in the spring of 1882. He ran the largest cattle operation in the county, roughly 900 acres of dry, stubborn land southwest of Red Rock Flats, and he ran it alone. Well, almost alone. He had 5 sons, and Lord Almighty, those 5 sons were the single most exhausting thing Elias Boone had ever encountered in 52 years of living on this earth. There was Hatch, the oldest at 17, who had his mother's eyes and his father's stubbornness, and thought he knew everything worth knowing. Then came Rio, 15, who was clever in a way that made adults nervous. Then the twins, Colt and Sam, at 12, who communicated almost entirely through destruction of property. And finally, there was little Benny, 8 years old, who didn't talk much, but had the uncanny ability to find every sharp object on the property and attempt to use it for something it was not designed for. 5 boys, no woman in the house, and a farm that was starting to buckle under the pressure of too much work and not enough hands. The last cook Elias hired lasted 11 days before she quit, after Colt and Sam released a live rattlesnake into the kitchen. Not out of malice, they insisted, but purely out of scientific curiosity. The one before that lasted 3 weeks before Hatch told her, to her face, that her biscuits tasted like river clay, and she ought to be ashamed. The one before that, well, Let's just say Benny's habit with sharp objects played a role. Elias needed help, real help, and he was running out of options. It was his ranch hand, old Pete Corrigan, who first said the name. Pete was 67 years old, had been working the Boone property since before Elias was born, and had exactly zero patience for social niceties. "You want someone who won't quit," Pete said one evening, whittling on the porch, while Elias stared at a pile of invoices he couldn't pay. "Then you need someone who's already lost everything else they had to lose." Elias looked up. "Who you got in mind?" Pete's knife slowed. "Clara Sutton." The silence between them stretched out like a hot afternoon. "People'll talk," Elias said finally. Pete shrugged. "People already talk. About you. About those boys. About everything that moves in this county. Question is whether you care more about your reputation or your livestock." Elias didn't answer, but the next morning, he rode into town. Clara was washing laundry behind the widow Hennessy's house, the one woman in Red Rock Flats who still let Clara work for her, even if she made her use the back entrance. When she heard boots stop on the gravel behind her, she didn't turn around. She'd learned not to turn around too fast. People who stopped to talk to Clara lately mostly stopped to tell her she wasn't welcome somewhere. "Mrs. Sutton," she turned. The man standing there was tall, weathered, with a jaw that looked like it had been carved from the same stone as the Red Rock Plateau. He had his hat in his hands, and an expression that looked like he was about to do something that cost him something. "Mr. Boone," she said. She knew him by sight. Everyone did. "Something I can help you with?" He cleared his throat. "I've got 5 boys and no cook, and a farm that's falling apart around my ears. I need someone who can manage a household and hold their ground against children who have made it their life's work to break every adult they've ever encountered." He paused. "I'm asking if you'd come work for me. Room and board, $3 a week. And I will not..." He stopped, looked at the ground, looked back up. "I will not give one single thought to what anyone in this town has said about you. Your work is your business. Your past is yours. I'm only asking about your future." Clara was quiet for a long moment. Behind her, the laundry dripped. A rooster crowed somewhere down the lane. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Take the rest of the day," Elias said. "I'll be at the feed store at 4 o'clock. If you're not there, I'll understand." He put his hat back on and walked away without another word. Clara watched him go, and for the first time in 2 years, something inside her chest, something she'd thought was dead, moved. She was at the feed store at 3:45, and if you thought the story was starting to get warm and easy, hang on, because those 5 boys were about to make sure nobody had it easy. The first morning at the Boone farm, Clara arrived with a single carpet bag and found the kitchen looking like something between a battlefield and a pig pen. The stove was cold. The pantry had a mouse problem. There were dried beans soaking in a pot that had been left there so long she couldn't identify what color the water was supposed to be. Hatch was leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed when she walked in. "We don't need a cook," he said. He looked her up and down the way only a 17-year-old with too much confidence and not enough experience could. "We've been managing fine." Clara looked at the kitchen, looked at him. "You've been managing the way a fire manages," she said, "consuming everything and leaving ash." She set her bag down. "Now, either you help me get this stove going, or you stand there and watch. Your choice." Hatch blinked. He'd expected arguments, or tears, or someone backing down. He got none of those things. He stood there another beat, then, slowly, pushed off the doorframe and went to fetch the firewood. The twins were her next obstacle. Colt and Sam appeared at the kitchen window. 30 minutes later, faces pressed against the glass, watching her move through the space like she owned it. She didn't acknowledge them for several minutes. Then, without looking up from the dough she was working, "You two going to stand there all morning? Or do you want to do something useful?" They exchanged a glance. "What's useful?" Colt said. "Collect 14 eggs from the hen house without breaking any of them. If you manage it, I'll let you decide what goes in the corn cake." They disappeared. They came back with 13 eggs, and one cracked one that Colt was trying to hide behind his back. Clara looked at it, then looked at him. "You get to eat the cracked one," she said. He did not argue. Rio, the clever one, tried a different approach. He decided to test her with questions. Sharp, probing questions designed to make her feel small or stupid. At supper that second evening, he asked her, very casually, whether she thought a woman who'd lived under a man's roof without being married to him had any business teaching children about right and wrong. The table went quiet. Clara finished chewing, set down her fork, looked at Rio directly. "I think," she said, "that a boy who uses words as weapons to make himself feel bigger ought to spend some time thinking about what he's actually afraid of. And I think supper is not the place for that conversation. But if you want to have it after, genuinely, honestly, I'll be on the porch." Rio said nothing. But that night, he came to the porch. They talked for an hour and 20 minutes about his mother, about fear, about what it meant to feel like the world could take everything you loved without warning. Clara didn't give him answers. She gave him the thing nobody had given her in 2 years, someone who actually listened. By the end of the first week, only Benny, little, quiet, wide-eyed Benny, hadn't spoken a word to her. He watched her from doorways and corners and the other end of long hallways. He watched the way a child watches something they desperately want, but can't bring themselves to reach for. It was a Tuesday morning in early October, 53 days into Clara's time at the Boone farm, when the first real crisis hit. Are you subscribed yet? Because I need every one of you here for what happens next. This is the moment that changes everything. Hit that subscribe button and don't move. Elias had ridden out before dawn to check on the south fence line, which a storm had taken out 3 nights prior. He'd left Clara with instructions to keep the boys out of the south pasture and to expect the cattle broker from Tucson sometime around noon. What he did not leave her with was any warning about the fact that the south fence being down meant 40 head of cattle were loose and heading north toward the road. Clara found out at 7:15 in the morning when Hatch came barreling into the kitchen with mud up to his knees and the news. "Cattle are out. South fence. They're heading toward Mullen Road." Clara didn't stop moving. She turned off the stove, checked that Benny was in the house, and was out the door in less time than it takes to say it. "Rio, get on the gray mare and cut east around the ridge. Don't let them cross the creek. Colt, Sam, you're on foot. I need you flanking left. Make noise. Make a lot of noise." She paused at the door. "Hatch, you're with me." Hatch stared. "You can ride? I was breaking horses at 13, she said. "Move." What followed was 2 hours of the most chaotic, exhausting, mud-soaked cattle work any of those boys had ever done, and they'd grown up on a cattle farm. Clara rode like she'd been born on a horse, which she more or less had been. She cut off the lead steer twice, turned a running herd without losing one, and got all 40 cattle back through the gap in the fence before the cattle broker arrived from Tucson, who, when he pulled up in his wagon, found 5 mud-caked children and a woman with a torn sleeve and loose hair who looked like she'd fought the land itself and won. He tipped his hat. She nodded back. Then she turned to the boys. "Go wash up," she said. "Supper's late, but it'll be worth waiting for." Hatch was quiet the whole walk back to the house. At the porch steps, he stopped. "Thank you," he said. It sounded like it cost him something. "Don't thank me," Clara said. "It's your farm. You should care about it that much." She looked at him sideways. "You did well today." Something in Hatch's face shifted. The armor he'd been wearing since the first morning, the crossed arms, the hard eyes, the careful distance, softened, not disappeared, just softened. It was a start. Elias heard about the cattle from Pete when he came back that afternoon. He rode up to find Clara back in the kitchen, with her hair pinned back up and a stew on the stove, and Benny, for the first time, sitting at the kitchen table inside the house instead of in a doorway. He stood in the kitchen entrance and watched her for a moment. She was teaching Benny how to shell dried beans, showing him how to press the pod just so, letting him feel the small, satisfying pop. Benny's face was entirely concentrated, the way children look when they're learning something that matters to them. Elias cleared his throat. Clara looked up. "I heard about the cattle," he said. "Fence needs a proper repair," she said. I made a note of the post spacing. "You'll need about 8 new posts and 30 yards of wire at minimum." He looked at her for a long moment. "You saved me a considerable amount of money today." "I saved you your cattle," she said. "Same thing." She turned back to the stove. He stayed in the doorway a beat longer than necessary. "I'll get the wire tomorrow," he said finally. "Good," she said. He left, and Pete Corrigan, who had been watching the whole exchange from the porch outside, smiled to himself and went back to whittling. "Let me ask you something. Have you ever known someone who seemed absolutely determined not to need anyone, and then watched the moment they finally stopped pretending? Leave your answer in the comments, because Elias Boone was about to have that moment, and it was coming from the last direction he expected. It was Benny who broke the wall. 6 weeks in, on a cold November evening with frost already forming on the window glass, Clara was sitting by the fire mending one of Sam's shirts when she heard small footsteps. She looked up. Benny stood in the hallway, clutching something to his chest. She waited. She'd learned with Benny that waiting was the only thing that worked. He crossed the room in small, careful steps and held out what he'd been holding. It was a drawing, done in charcoal on the back of a flour sack, of a figure at a stove. The figure had a bun of hair and an apron. Around the figure, like planets around a sun, were 5 smaller figures. Clara looked at it for a long time. Then she looked at Benny. "Is this us?" she asked quietly. He nodded.
Keep this drawing?
"May I keep it?" she asked. He nodded again. Then, without any announcement, he climbed up beside her on the bench and leaned his small head against her arm and watched the fire. Clara sat very still. She didn't wrap an arm around him immediately. She just let him be there. Let him feel safe at whatever distance he needed. And after a few minutes, he leaned a little more and a little more. She looked down at the drawing in her hands, and for the first time since James died, she let herself cry. Not loudly, not in a way Benny would notice. Just 2 quiet tears that she wiped away with the sleeve of her dress before he could see them. It was another 3 weeks before Elias said anything that wasn't entirely practical. He was at the kitchen table one evening, everyone else already in bed, working through a ledger, and Clara was at the table too, writing a list for the next market day, when he said, without looking up, "You're not what I expected." Clara kept writing. "What did you expect?" He was quiet for a moment. "Someone who would leave." She looked up at that. He was still looking at the ledger. "I haven't left yet," she said. "No," he said. "You haven't." Another pause. "My boys talk about you," he said. "More than they've talked about anyone since their mother." Clara set down her pencil. She waited. He finally looked up, and there was something in his face that he hadn't let anyone see in 3 years. Something honest and uncertain, and very, very tired. "I want to ask you something," he said, "and I want you to be honest with me." "All right," she said. "Are you happy here?" She was quiet for a long time. Outside, the wind moved across the plains. The fire popped. Somewhere, a coyote called once, and then went silent. "I am," she said, for the first time in a long time. He nodded slowly, like that answer mattered more than he'd planned to let it. Good, he said. He went back to his ledger. Clara went back to her list. But something between them was different now, like a lock that had been opened without either of them deciding to open it. Winter came hard to Red Rock Flats that year. The temperature dropped to 19 below in January, the worst freeze in 11 years. 3 neighboring farms took serious losses. The Boone farm held, because Clara had spent October and November making sure it would. She'd overseen the reinforcement of the hay storage, gotten every animal into shelter before the first hard freeze, and reorganized the root cellar so they had enough food stores to last 4 months without a single supply run. The town noticed. Even the people who'd whispered Clara's name like it was something dirty began to notice that the Boone farm, which had been struggling for 3 years, was, somehow, doing better than it had in a long time. Mrs. Haverford, who ran the church social committee and had been among Clara's most consistent critics, came to Elias at church in late February. "I hear your household is running rather smoothly," she said, with the tone of someone who found that personally inconvenient. "It is," Elias said, "and that woman works harder than anyone I've ever hired," Elias said flatly. "And if you've got something else to say about her, I'd prefer you say it to me directly, so I can tell you exactly how wrong you are." Mrs. Haverford blinked. She was not used to being interrupted. Elias tipped his hat and walked away. The story of that exchange made its way around Red Rock Flats in the time it takes a horse to sneeze, which, in a town that size, was very fast. The evening he told Clara about that conversation was the evening everything changed. She laughed, a real laugh, not the careful, guarded kind she'd been giving for 2 years, but a full-chested, completely unguarded laugh that filled the kitchen and made Elias look at her like he'd just seen the sun come out. "You did not," she said. "I did," he said. He was almost smiling. Almost. "She must have been furious. She looked," he said, "like she'd swallowed a lemon sideways." Clara laughed again, and Elias, quietly, carefully, like a man who hadn't let himself feel much of anything good for a very long time, laughed too. A real laugh. Small, but real. And Hatch, walking past the kitchen door on his way to the barn, stopped, listened, and walked past again without saying anything.
Dad laughed today.
But later that night, he told Rayo, "Dad laughed today." Rayo looked up. "Real laugh." "Real laugh," Hatch said. They didn't say anything else, but they both went to sleep that night, feeling something they hadn't felt in 3 years. Something like hope.
I needed to tell you about the land.
In the spring, Elias asked Clara to stay, not as a hired hand, not as an employee, but as a permanent part of the family. He did not get down on one knee in some dramatic gesture. He was standing at the south fence they'd repaired together, looking out at the cattle moving in the early morning light, when he said quietly, "I don't want you to leave when the year's up."
You need to think about
Clara
this.
was quiet. "I know what people will say," he went on.
Ask again.
"I know it won't be easy. I know you might not want."
It ain't right.
He stopped, started over. "I'm not asking you to forget what you've been through. I'm asking you to consider the possibility that this is where you belong. Here, with us." The wind moved through the dry grass. Far off, one of the twins was hollering something at the other. Clara looked at the land. The big, stubborn, beautiful land that had tried to break her and hadn't. "I'm going to need you to talk to Hatch first," she said. Elias blinked. "Hatch? He's the oldest. He lost his mother. He needs to be part of this decision, not told about it. Part of it." She looked at Elias. "That matters." Elias stared at her for a moment. Then something in his face that had been quietly calculating shifted into something closer to awe. "All right," he said. I'll talk to Hatch. He did. That conversation lasted almost 2 hours, and Pete Corrigan, who happened to be repairing a nearby water trough, was absolutely not eavesdropping on any of it. When it was done, Hatch came to find Clara in the kitchen. He stood in the doorway, his old doorway, the crossed arms doorway, but his arms weren't crossed this time. "You'd better not leave," he said gruffly, because Benny would not recover.
Just Benny?
Clara raised an eyebrow. "Just Benny?" Hatch looked at the ceiling, looked at the floor. "None of us would," he said quietly.
Yes.
"Is that what you want to hear?"
I wanted to hear.
"Yes," she said. "That is exactly what I wanted to hear." The wedding was in April on the Boone property, with Pete Corrigan as best man, and all 5 boys cleaned up to within an inch of their lives. Benny with a new ribbon on his hat that Rio had absolutely not helped him tie. The ceremony was performed by the traveling pastor who came through Red Rock Flats every 6 weeks, and it was attended by about 30 people. Not many, but the ones who showed up were the ones who counted. Mrs. Haverford was not invited. Clara wore a dress the color of a spring sky, and she carried wildflowers because she said they were more honest than anything the florist in Tucson was selling. When she walked toward Elias, the boys standing in a row beside him, even Hatch, who was doing his very best not to visibly feel anything. Elias looked at her the way a man looks at something he almost didn't allow himself to have. Like gratitude had finally found a shape.
And I, my husband, for all our days.
I now pronounce you husband.
Years later, when Red Rock Flats was a faded memory for most who'd left it, and the Boone farm had grown into something solid and enduring, people would ask the boys what their childhood was like. Hatch, by then a grown man with children of his own, would say, "Complicated," and then it wasn't. Rio, who became a school teacher, would say, "I learned more from one woman at a dinner table than I ever learned from a book." Colt and Sam, who predictably ran a livestock operation together, would argue about who had contributed more to the cattle rescue of 1884 before agreeing that it had been, in their expert opinion, a team effort. And Benny, who grew up quiet and thoughtful and spent his life drawing beautiful, detailed drawings of the plains and the people on them, kept one piece of work above his desk until the day he died. A charcoal figure at a stove, 5 smaller figures around her, like planets around a sun.
Smells good, doesn't it?
The woman who everyone had given up on,
I'm hungry.
the one who stayed.
Patience, it'll be ready soon.
What did this story teach you? What stayed with you? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you know someone who needs to hear a story about the kind of courage that doesn't make headlines, share this video with them today. This video was created using artificial intelligence tools as part of an artistic and creative project designed to entertain and offer meaningful storytelling. The characters, situations, dialogue, and events depicted here are entirely fictional and the product of the author's imagination. They do not represent real historical individuals or documented events. For verified historical accounts of life in the American frontier, we encourage you to consult academic sources, university archives, or curated historical institutions. The goal of this project has always been simple: to tell human stories, imperfect, honest, and worth hearing.